Morning all. We'll just be starting in a second. So we're just getting the live stream or the recording stream, whatever, up and running. Excellent. Right. The stream is up and running, so we will get cracking. Good morning. For those of you who don't know me, I am Richard Clare, leader of Wiltshire Council, and I'm chairing the ICP. We've got an interesting meeting here. We've got about half virtual, half present. This could be interesting to chair as we go through. If I can, just as a bit of housekeeping, as we start, anyone in the room wanting to talk, you are going to have to use your microphone. If you don't, the people attending online will not hear you, and then I will be reminding you to use your mic. And the system will only let 2 mics work at once, so when you finish speaking, please turn your mic off. I'll try and turn mine off, but I am quite bad at remembering to. If you're attending virtually, if you want to say something, please put your hand up. I can't promise I'll come to you in order. At the moment, I can see everyone on the screen, but if we get even more people, this could be interesting. It could be, so far, this sort of hybrid meetings work, but I'm not sure I've seen one with quite this many people on. Another 2 or 3, and we could get some interesting times in terms of working out who wants to speak. If we start then with, I guess let's do an introduction. We've got a lot of people in the room. I'm sure most of us know each other, but I'm not sure we all know each other. So I've said who I am. If we go around here, Paula, you're going to have to use the mic to speak.
Hello, I'm Paula Tucker and I'm PA to the leader.
Good morning, I'm Alan Mitchell and I'm with Wiltshire Health Watch.
Good morning, I'm Charlotte Hitchings and I'm the chair of AWP Mental Health.
Good morning, Julian Kirby. I'm the non-exec director of the ICB for patient and public engagement.
So the right-hand bar to...
I should listen to instructions, sorry, thank you. Good morning, everyone. Sue Harriman, I'm the Chief Exec of the Integrated Care Board.
Morning, I'm Stephanie Elsey, I'm Chair of the ICB.
Good morning, I'm Fiona Slevin-Brown, I'm the Place Director for Wiltshire.
Morning, everyone. I'm Richard Ismail, Director of Strategy and Transformation.
Morning, everyone. Steve Madden, Director of Public Health, Swindon Borough Council.
Good morning, Kate Blackburn, Director of Public Health, Wiltshire Council.
Morning, Amanda Webb, Chief Medical Officer for the ICB.
Jane Moore, Director of Equalities, Innovation and Digital Enterprise for the ICB.
Good morning, Ben Fielding, Senior Democratic Services Officer. Thank you.
Thanks. And then if we come to online attendees, and I'll take you in the sort of order I can see you on the screen, which means Rebecca, you're up first. Terence?
Morning, I'm Terence Overall, I'm the Chief Executive of Wiltshire Council.
David?
Good morning, I'm David Reynard, I'm the leader of Swindon Council.
Oh, this isn't fair. Everyone's position on the screen's changed now. Alison?
Alison Ryan, Chair of the Royal United Hospital.
Kevin? Stephen?
Steve Lakeman, Chair of Wiltshire Health and Care.
And lastly, Will.
Good morning, I'm Will Godfrey, I'm the Chief Executive of Autism Council.
Great, thank you all. And I will apologise now. I'm absolutely useless at remembering names until I've met someone 7 or 8 times. So at least if you're on the screen, I can see your name. Otherwise, it'll be, I'll probably end up pointing. So apologies. What apologies do we have?
Apologies, we have apologies. Leader of Baines, Kevin Guy's declined, but
Kevin's
he's
here.
over there. The CEO, Susie Kemp, Rebecca Reynolds, Laura Ambler, Gordon Mavuti. That's it.
Okay, great, thanks. Are there any other apologies anyone knows of that need to be given? No? Okay, and this ICP needs to be held in public. We will have a private section moving on. I'm not sure how normal it will be for us to have private sections, but for this first meeting, I think that's important. This first session is public. I'm not aware that we've had any members of the public say that they want to ask any questions. We don't have any members of the public in attendance, but just so we're aware that moving forward, this is going to be a public meeting and needs to be run as such with public engagement, but it's not clearly going to be a factor this morning. That doesn't mean we don't need to go through this first section because this is being streamed, it will be available, and I suspect even for some of us in the room, the concept of the ICS, the ICP and the rest of the IC blocks are still slightly confusing. Certainly for people watching online, I think they are. So I think the first section is really important to start by making it clear what it is we are and what it is that we are designed to do. So declarations of interest, I'm not aware of any. Are there any that anyone needs to raise? Again, we're following the formats, for those of you who aren't familiar with this, for a public meeting of a council. So just to explain why we're going through this process, but I think it really is important that we've got that public accountability and that we're treating it as in the same way we treat any other meeting that was of a decision-making body that was being held in public. So we then come on to what is an ICP. Andrew.
Leader, apologies. Andrew Corbett doesn't appear to be online, and I'm trying to track him down to be able to understand whether he's going to connect in or not. I haven't been able to get a response from him at the moment, so my apologies on that. I don't know whether it would be helpful for us to collectively have a conversation around the Integrated Care Partnership. Many of us have been working together collectively, getting to this very point, and I'm sure it would be helpful for us to be able to discuss that, and then Stephanie and I can talk about that in relation to the Integrated Care Board.
I think that sounds sensible, and I think it's important that we all understand from our different perspectives, from the different bodies that we're coming from, what we see the ICP as being as well. If you want to start, Sue, go for it, and then we'll bring others in. But
thank you, and Stephanie, you may want to add. So I guess the first important thing to say is I sit here as the Chief Exec of the Integrated Care Board, which is the NHS statutory organisation. But I sit around this table just as a partner of the Integrated Care Partnership. And that's really important because this is obviously as a result of the legislation that came into force from the beginning of July of this year. So it's very new. And we are in the very early months of working out what the legislation means, what opportunities that provides. Our Integrated Care Partnership is an opportunity for the NHS and for local government and for wider partners that work with, support and provide health and care to our local communities to come together to think about how we can work together differently, but most importantly, how we think beyond the provision of healthcare and statutory services, but think about how we can work with our local communities and think about what I would describe as the wider determinants of health, how we work, how we live, the opportunities that we have, the voices that our communities will bring, and how that influences decision-making, either through local government in relation to health and care, but through the NHS. Importantly, one of the key tasks of our Integrated Care Partnership is to create the strategy for Bath, North East Somerset, Swindon and Wiltshire. And that is something that we'll be talking about as the morning progresses. But that strategy is incredibly important to us as partners because we must pay due attention to that in the delivery of our services, either through the NHS or in partnership with local authorities as well. The difference really around integrated care partnerships is to challenge us to step out of our statutory organisations, to think beyond our statutory responsibilities and to really think about how we can break down some of the what would have been historical and blocks or barriers between working together, between organisations, between health and local government, but also for us to be able to work with, in partnership, local communities and people who who want to live happy, fulfilled lives, and for us to engage with communities. Around the table of the Integrated Care Partnership today, we have a smaller group. This is our first and inaugural ICP meeting, and very importantly, although we all sit here today representing the different sectors, different organisations, different perspectives, moving forward, our Integrated Care Partnership must ensure that it's fully inclusive and that it's able to engage with and listen and work alongside all elements of the community. So today is just the beginning. This is really the very first working group and the thinking about how do we really realise and release the ambition that we would have to collaborate and to think about integration of services, all in service of improving outcomes for our residents. But I'm just going to briefly look around at my colleagues, because obviously in the absence of Andrew, there was no preparation from me for that. So I'm really just happy for others to join in and pleased to say if I've misrepresented anything or if they want to build on what I've said.
I thought that was a pretty good start off the cuff. Stephanie.
Just to add my penny's worth to this, for me, the ICP is one of the most exciting parts of the recent reforms. And when it was first mooted, whenever, a year or two ago now, I remember thinking, what's this thing? I kind of understood the point of the ICS and the ICB, but I thought, what is this ICP thing supposed to be? And then if you read the guidance, there's lots of guidance on the government website about it all. What makes this important and exciting is the fact that it looks to the medium and to the long term and to really trying to step back, as Sue says, from the day to day. And, you know, everyone's maxed out, aren't they, at the moment, particularly with the pressures that everybody's under. Step back and say, okay, so this is where we are. We've got the data. This is what the data says. These are our objectives for the future. And this is how we're going to move towards achieving those objectives around improving the health of our population as a whole. So for me, it sounds weird to say this is the fun bit, but this is the fun bit because we get to step back and you know, be a little bit creative and imaginative about doing things differently. And it'll take time to do that. And the other aspect of this that I think is exciting is that we have the potential here to bring in wider system partners, whether it's the public sector or the private sector or the voluntary sector, to actually support us in achieving those objectives. So it's quite ambitious. It can be really ambitious. We can't boil the ocean. I haven't got the resources to boil the ocean, unfortunately. But what we can do is have a little bit more ambition about the direction of travel for us all working together to actually improve the health of the population. So, and I'm delighted we've got the DPHs here because they're the one that's going to help us work out what works and how we can do that. That's just my penny's worth to add to what Sue says. I hope that's helpful.
That's great, thanks. Kate, do you want to add something?
Yeah, I would agree entirely with what Stephanie's just said. I think I really see the ICP as that space where we're not doing the business as usual. This is the space for us to really look at 10, 20, 30 years' time, because we know that by 2040, you know, our populations will have grown significantly and pretty much almost exclusively in the 65 plus age range. So if we think business as usual is tricky now, you know, so this is that space, and I think as an ICP, we must be outcomes focused, and it must be about holding the system to account. You know, I know there's a real desire for this not to just be a talking space, but actually to really have some set outcomes and to achieve what we say. And totally agree with you, Stephanie. We can't boil the ocean all at once, but I think there's one or two really key things that as a system we could say, right, this is what we really want to focus in on. And you'll see those changes start to happen, and once that snowball starts rolling, you know, you really will see those changes. And I think the other thing is the participation of our public is so important, because we are all working in certain organisations or with certain expertise, but we don't truly understand what it's like to live in certain parts of our communities. We don't understand what it's like to be under that toxic stress where you can't you don't have the ability to be able to make decisions or to even see choice. And so I think really making sure we are that group of people to bring those voices in, as well as set some outcomes, is exactly what we should be doing.
Thank you. And for those of you who've had to hear me talk for any length of time, you'll know how much emphasis I think it's important to place on that strategic long-term vision, because it's the only way of actually changing anything. Politics is stuck in some cycle loop of instant delivery, and that is no way to look, well, it's no way to look at anything in my view, but still, I think we need to bear in mind this is bringing together not just at the moment we're all working in our own ways with our own health and wellbeing boards, our own approaches. We have 3 different authorities, we have different acutes, we've then got everyone coming together under one body. That's going to be an interesting challenge. My vision for this this partnership is very much along the lines that's been expressed. This cannot be a talking shop. It's got to be a place where we understand and set the strategic priorities. We'll come more onto that later. Sorry, I think we've got a note. Apparently there are some people who've been invited who are in reception. I wonder if, please, if you, yeah, thanks. So it can't be a case of simply being a talking shop. We've got to set the strategy, and then we've got to make sure that we are not just having jolly nice presentations on this is the strategy and here isn't it shiny, but actually understanding what progress is being made. Because I think without that, there's no way of actually making sure that we are making progress. So I see that as critical. How we deal with getting the views of the public is really interesting. As a politician, I get the best insight from the public through chance conversations or knocking on people's doors. Chance conversations are probably the best. In car parks seem to be the best location at the moment because we've got issues with the parking machines. So I'm talking to people there, and then you're finding all sorts of things that have got nothing to do with parking, but about the issues they're facing. So how we're going to do that, I don't know. Perhaps we need to set up chance conversation booths somewhere. I don't, goodness knows. Did anyone else want to come in on what they felt the ICP wanted to be? Are there any other thoughts or ideas?
Just picking up on your point about public consultation, I'm here, Chair of Health Watch in Wiltshire. I'd just like to emphasise that it's incumbent on everybody in the partnership to make sure they keep talking to their customers, the people who they serve. Health Watch will keep an overview on things, but we all need to be involved in that. And I think, Richard, the role of councillors in making sure they reflect what they're hearing on the doorsteps needs to come into this sort of forum. So I think we're all agreed on that.
No, thank you. How we go about doing it, my experience of public meetings is the public that tend to want to engage aren't necessarily the public that you want to talk to. They are part of the public you want to talk to, but they're a very focused group with some very focused issues. And we need to make sure somehow we get to that wider group. And certainly, I'm sure Kevin and David have their own approaches. I certainly have an approach that we are following from a Wiltshire Council perspective. Lynn, you wanted to come in.
Thank you. Yeah, it was. I was really pleased to hear what was said. A wider partnership, so including the community and the military sector, and how important, if we're going to do things differently, is to come in and for us all to work better together. So just wanted to flag that as well.
No, thank you. And we've got to make sure that every voice that comprises the partnership has that ability to influence things. If you're looking at a strategy without the voluntary sector in the areas we're looking at addressing, I'm not quite sure how I see that functioning without the voluntary sector in there, for example. Welcome to those who are just joining us. If you're in the room, if you're going to speak, please make sure you put your microphone on before you do, otherwise those online can't hear us. If you're online and want to speak, please put your hand up. And if we get one more person, I'm going to need someone to keep a list of who wants to talk, because we're very close to not being able to see everyone on the screen. So I think that covers off a discussion around what the ICP is and what we're aiming to get from this board. I think it's going to evolve as we go forward. I don't think we need to be too prescriptive right now. I think we need that broad direction to create a strategy and then work out how it's being delivered. So if we then move on to the next item, which is what is an integrated care board? We're going to get IC'd to death through this process, but still. I think we're back to Sue and Stephanie on this.
Thank you very much. So I'm a lot more comfortable with this one. And we did share some slides. I don't know whether they are available. Perfect, thank you. I'll just wait for the slides to come up because the first one provides a graphic really, which shows where the Integrated Care Board fits in, particularly in the context of the conversation that we've just had around the Integrated Care Partnership. Now, importantly, together, as we work, ICB and ICP, we become part of the integrated care system. Could we move to the next?
I think that's the one.
Oh no, here we go. That's the one. There we go. This is the one. We're all panicking now about which slides are up there. And I think this is just a really helpful graphic, really, because as the leaders just said, there are lots of integrated, whether it's partnerships, systems, boards, and as we'll hear a little bit later, alliances as well. I think it's something we need to be mindful of, actually, when we're speaking with our communities and with the general public. It's quite a confusing landscape. But the Integrated Care Board is a statutory NHS organisation. With the legislation on the 1st of July of this year, clinical commissioning groups were dissolved and we became an Integrated Care Board at that stage. It's really important to note that we didn't just change the name of the organisation, we fundamentally changed the expectation around the way that we work. We still have a number of the statutory responsibilities that the CCG had before. That's around developing a plan for delivery. That is in relation to managing the NHS budget and arranging the services and commissioning the services, the health services within the BSW patch. But importantly, there's been a recently published operating framework from NHS England. It talks about a radically new way of working, which is really one that works in partnership, one that works with collaboration, breaking down some of those frustrating historical boundaries between organisations that I know for people who use our services can often find confusing and frustrating. And at the same time, it's beholden on us to collaborate and to work, the point made very eloquently, to improve the outcomes for the citizens that we care for. And within that, I think the other important things to recognise is the partners that we work with, those that deliver our services. And Leader, you mentioned some of them earlier on, whether they're some of the acute hospitals, primary care services, community services, mental health services, the voluntary sector. Those organisations, many of them statutory in nature, retain their accountability. But in the new landscape, they also have a duty to work and to collaborate and to integrate services for the improvement of outcomes for citizens that use those. The other thing that's really important for us as an integrated care board, although we cover a large geography, and it's important to recognise there is real benefit from working across that geography, whether it's around scale, whether it's around looking at improving health outcomes. Actually, we must work with the principle of subsidiarity, and we must ensure that what we do is we enable change to happen as close to service delivery as possible. So it's very important to us that we work not just with our local communities, with our neighbourhoods, with our places, but with our integrated care alliances, which we'll hear about a little later. If I move on to the next slide, please, you will see within that what I've just referenced to there. There are 42 integrated care boards across the country. We are one of them. And all of us are working within a similar approach around working at system, working at place, and working at neighbourhood. We are working with our statutory organisations, but we're also working with our statutory organisations, encouraging them to create partnerships and collaborations. You'll see here it talks about provider collaboratives, but we're also looking at creating alliances, all in service of breaking down some of the organisational boundaries and some of the blockages and creating levers to effect change, to join up pathways of care so they work for people that need to use them. We do have an integrated care board, and it is very different to that of the CCG governing body historically. This is a unitary board, so it has a chair, a chief exec, it has non-executives, but it also has partner members, and it has executive members of the integrated care board. It's a unitary board, which means that we make decisions collectively and we share risk collectively in relation to those decisions. Importantly, many of the partner members are members of the Integrated Care Partnership as well, because those partner members work in a number of the statutory organisations and beyond. So, for example, we have a representative from NHS Trusts from the acute sector, one from the community sector, one from mental health, one from voluntary sector, and one from primary care. And those partner members, which is a very new concept for an NHS board, work to hold us to account and to seek assurance about the decisions that we make as an integrated care board in service of improving outcomes. The new operating guidance from NHS England as well also clearly defines the role that we have as an integrated care board in ensuring the performance, the quality, the safety and the outcomes of those NHS provider services and partners as well. If we move to the next slide, you will see this is our integrated care board, and I'm going to, at the end, Stephanie, just to warm me up, I'll let you come in and do as chair to give some comments and thoughts about this. We have 18 members of the integrated care board. It's a unitary board, all have voting rights. I've, in my 15 or so years as an NHS executive board member, I've never actually voted, because obviously we work together, we work in an environment where we have good line of sight on information. We can work in a high challenge, high trust environment, but we make our decisions well together and we share our risks together. But if we need to, there is an option to vote. You can see there the different members that we have as well. We've got a number of those around the table with us today, but we have, from an executive perspective from the ICB, Chief Finance Officer, Chief Medical Officer, Chief Nursing Officer, and myself. The other 14 members are either non-executives or partner members. And then the final slide really just gives a little bit of detail around the statutory functions that are that of the Integrated Care Board. I won't talk to these because they're the things that you would expect to see, but I will just take a moment to reflect on Stephanie's point around the opportunity for us to use the new legislation for us to be really ambitious and bold about what we would want to do in service of improving our offer to the residents. So very much it is services first, organisation second, and collectively that should create an environment for us to be ambitious, safe and effective, but inclusive, and to think very differently and step out of what can sometimes be NHS stuck in its ways, not listening and not engaging in the way it should, and us to reflect and work with our partners so that we can learn and adapt and work alongside them. Stephanie, any comments as chair that you would want to say in relation to the ICB?
Thanks, Sue. If you could go back to the previous slide, I'd like to just explain why the composition of the ICB is as it is. And this was determined probably a good year or so ago now, prior to the legislation completing its passage through Parliament. We were required to draft a constitution that was based on a model provided by NHS England. And this is where these reforms are genuinely different, in the sense that whilst NHS England clearly regulates the way we operate, for the first time probably in the history of the NHS, there has been a lot more powers, if you like, delegated to local areas about how they operate. So the ICB isn't like an old regional health authority, it's not like a primary care trust, and it's not like a CCG. It's a completely new animal to the NHS. And in a way, it's quite radical, because it's much more open and transparent, because we have to meet in public, and also because it introduces into the board partner members, which are effectively a new concept. In fact, I don't, if Andrew Corbett-Nolan from GGI were here, he'd be saying this is unique in the public sector. As Sue said, the board is a unitary board, which is modelled on the corporate sector, where all directors, you're all a director, everybody is equal on the board, they're all directors, they have a vote. As Sue says, you know, you very rarely end up voting, and certainly I wouldn't want to achieve that. So that makes it very different from local government and councils, so that it's completely non-political, and it operates a bit like a commercial board in the sense of having all members as directors and who have a vote. As it says on the screen, the legislation required that there were certain positions on the board. Obviously, my role as chair, and just for information, I was appointed by NHS England, but my appointment was approved by the Secretary of State, so there is a kind of national democratic element to that. And obviously, I'm accountable to the Secretary of State for the performance of the ICB as a whole. Sue was appointed again by NHS England, but with my approval, in a sense that there was that kind of cascades down. And then we appointed the executive directors of the ICB. Three others of whom have to be on the board, and that's the medical director, Amanda, who's here today, the nursing director, John May, who's not here today, and Gary Henage, who's the finance director. Those are required in the legislation. In addition to that, we had to have a number of non-executive directors, at least two. One was to chair the audit committee, which has a typical commercial audit committee function of making sure that the board operates in a proper way, manages risk properly, that sort of thing. And the other one was to chair the remuneration committee, which determines the pay for all of the executives on the ICB. So those had to be two independent non-executive directors. Beyond that, we had freedom to decide what else we wanted to do. And as it was just me at the time, I decided, and I'll take the blame or the credit for this, depending on how you want to look at it, I felt that it was important that we had several more non-executive directors to kind of mirror a typical NHS board, in the sense that a normal NHS board in most organisations would have a finance committee, finance obviously being extremely important, a quality committee, which monitors safety and quality and outcomes, a people committee, because our workforce is so important to the success of both the ICB and the system as a whole. And I combine the chairmanship of that with the remuneration committee role. Obviously got the audit committee, and what's the other, and then community engagement. And this is one of my personal passions, if I can be open about this. It's not typical. Not many ICBs have a community engagement, a public community engagement subcommittee of the board, and we have Julian here who leads that committee. And the reason I feel this is so important is that if we are to succeed in the kind of transformation of health and care services, then we need to make sure that we do it with our patients, with our communities, with their families, the carers, etc. And then we have a better chance of getting the changes, the integration right first time. So I'm particularly keen on that, and very keen that the ICB should work very closely with local government and the voluntary sector, hence why we've got Pam here too, to make sure that we do that. Then there were mandatory requirements around partner members. We had to have a GP representative, and that's a key word actually. They are there, the partner members are there to represent the perspective of their sector. They're not there to represent their organisation. So Pam is here to represent the voluntary sector as a whole, not the organisation that she works for as a day job. We had to have at least one local authority partner member. When I discussed this with colleagues in our three local authorities, they expressed a very strong view that all three of them wanted to be on the ICB. I was delighted by that, because I thought that's good. I want them, all three of them, to be actively involved in the development of the ICB and the system as a whole. So great. And thank you very much, council leaders, for allowing your three chief execs to sit on the ICB. I think that's a very positive thing. And then on the NHS side, I felt it was very important that we had the expertise and the perspective of community health services and acute health services and mental health health services. And so we have those representatives. Have I forgotten anything? I don't think I have. So that's why we ended up with 18 people on our board, which is large. And some ICBs do have larger boards than that, believe it or not. I think Northumbria, the North East and Cumbria have something like 26, which must be hard to manage. 18 is tough enough, but I felt it was important, particularly at the start of our journey of developing this new way of working, that we had all of the key perspectives sitting around the table so that we can work together and define our future. And the only other comment I wanted to make was to say a little bit about NHS England. This isn't just a reform for NHS and health services and social care services at local level, it's a national reform programme as well. And NHS England, particularly under its relatively new leadership now of Amanda Pritchard, are working with us to redefine the way that we work together, and the operating model that Sue mentioned is part of that. I don't think I'm talking out of school if I say that a lot of people have the impression that NHS England is very top-down, very command and control. Well, it can be sometimes, when it and particularly when it needs to be, particularly in the pandemic recently, it was totally command and control. They are trying to change that and working with us to create a much more collaborative, co-produced approach to reforms and working together. And they're having some success in that. There's a journey to go on, but I just wanted to, to say on the record that they are changing too and have got a lot of reform going on. I'm now shut up.
Thank you. Was there anything further anyone wanted to add on the ICB side? No, I think that all makes sense. Excellent. So we then... Sorry. Will, yes. Oh, hi, Will. Sorry, the pictures are so small I can barely see your hand up now, but go for it.
That was really helpful, and I think, that sort of, for me, just highlights the complexity of the system. I think it's important that we understand and recognise that, and understand that we're still sort of in the foothills, I think, exploring that. There are just two things I just want to say, though, that I think, I hope will focus our mind a little bit. So, one for me is it's easy to say we're going to change the way we work. It's much more difficult to actually deliver that. And for me, that's one of the tests that I will apply as we go forward. And that then links to my second point, really, about language. So I think language is really important, particularly when we engage with the public. We probably tend to use both in the health world and the local government world certain ways of talking that probably aren't particularly easy for the public to engage with. So the one that I use a lot, which is my hobby also, I think I find it awful that we describe people in hospital as having non-criteria to reside. They're human beings, and I think far too often we get ground down into talking about the process, and we forget that at the end of a process as a human being, and certainly I would be really interested in testing out at some stage some of our public's initial understanding of how they experience our services, because I suspect they don't think they're anything like as integrated as we think they are. And for me, that's one of the tests that I think we need to start thinking about. So, yes, I recognise that we've got a long way to go. I recognise that we're at the early parts of this, but I think there are some really key fundamentals that we need to keep our focus on.
Yeah, thanks, Will. And I think the point about language is really important. I was briefly in the military. The military don't speak a different language to the world, but they certainly speak a different dialect to the rest of the UK. I think local government probably speaks a different dialect. In my experience, the NHS is getting close to speaking a different language at times. And translating that to the public is going to be challenging, particularly when you start looking at the structures that are created. It's something we really are going to have to work really hard on doing. We forget quickly enough from a council perspective, in my experience, and this is more critical and therefore something we've got to keep top of mind. I'm not seeing any further comments, in which case I'm going to ask if we then move on to trying to define what an integrated care, to defining what an integrated care alliance is. Steve, Fiona, I've set you up there to something that might be a little tricky.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And I think one of the things, just build on your point about language, our integrated care alliances are hopefully a mechanism through which we'll agree some common language that we can use when we're engaging and talking with our local populations. So Steve and myself are going to give you a brief overview of what integrated care alliances look like in the BSW ICS. And then Steve's going to provide, I suppose, a live example of the ICA at work in the Swindon area, which I hope colleagues will find helpful. So you've heard Sue and Stephanie talk, I think, about the kind of broader ICS and ICB arrangements. And within our ICS, we've got our local partnership arrangements and the building blocks of the ICS, which are integrated care alliances, which in essence are places, our geographical footprints where partners come together on behalf of and as part of the system to work collaboratively for the benefit of our local communities. And our places have a key role in enabling the ICS in delivering its strategic aims, including, I think, for our population, supporting that broader social and economic development, which I think particularly at the moment is incredibly important for us. So if we want to move through the slides, I think you can skip the first one if that's helpful, Ben. Oh. That's one of those. Apologies. You get repetitive strain. If we want to move on to the next slide. So just a couple of points I wanted to, I suppose, highlight, building on the previous conversations around particularly the features of places and their particular contribution to the system. I think, as colleagues have touched on previously, the closeness of that subsidiarity point, the closeness to local populations, the relationships, the democratic mandate, which I think is essential, and knowing our local populations. A strengthened relationship, or the geography, sorry, around which health and local authority partners align best, which for us is Wiltshire, Baines and Swindon, and population sizes, I think, that allow us to really get close to those communities. So we're coming down to a kind of a local level, and that where we currently provide locality-based service models. So those features enable us to make decisions together as partners, enable us to strengthen our relationship with local communities, and in all three of the ICAs, the voluntary and community sectors and Health Watch are integral partners within our arrangements. Integration of community-based service, they enable us to tap into and empower local assets, I think give an agency to the local population, opportunities for us to reduce duplication, inefficiencies and address unwarranted variation. I think at a time in nationally around austerity, I think it's really important for us to be able to look to where we can draw the benefits to make best use of our collective pound. And then allow us to look at population health management around footprints that offer the potential to address access and reduce inequalities. Next slide. So what's an integrated care alliance in ours? And you can see how the geographies look in our system. So our ICAs are the way that we will work together around those geographical areas through shared goals and accountability. Our place partnerships arrangements will be formed by those organisations and communities responsible for arranging and delivering health and care services. I think in particular recognising that at a local level, those footprints may be slightly different. So we're talking about right down to neighbourhood levels, because that's what's relevant and important to our populations. It helps us build financial sustainability for health and care through a better understanding of how our resources are deployed, the challenges we face, and how we might share resources and increase shared working. They enable us to understand our population in a different way, moving towards a strengths-based life course approach, giving agency to individuals and communities to live the life they want with the choice and control over any support they need through self-care and contributions to community-based solutions. So it's really moving away from that slightly paternalistic approach that potentially, historically, the NHS might have approached by really looking at this through a different lens. And as a collection of partners, enabling us to influence the system strategic planning conversations that we touched on earlier and decision making through having a strong placed-based voice at an ICS level, which I think is really important to kind of give us some of that strength of collective opinion. And I'm just going to hand over to Steve, who's going to bring some of this to life for us. Thank you.
Thanks, Fiona. And I suppose it would be a miss for a Director of Public Health not to maximise on the opportunity of a captured audience to say that if you are eligible for your flu or COVID vaccine this season, please make sure you take up the opportunity. Thank you. So just wanted to put into perspective the example from Swindon. So if we move to the next slide, and just to say a huge 50th happy birthday to the Magic Roundabout, which celebrates its 50th birthday this year, if you believe it or not. So the Swindon journey, we appreciate, has been different from both ICAs for Baines and Wiltshire, but we're all on the same journey. It's probably pertinent to mention that for us, we have been working since probably early 2021 to make sure that we were in a good position to be able to deliver against our aims and objectives in regard to what we wanted from an integrated care alliance. As we've highlighted on the slide there, we started our planning in shadow format in 2021 with quite a significantly sized workshop, which was rather uncomfortable during a period of COVID, but really important for setting the foundations for what we wanted for Swindon going forward. For us, it was very much about developing the story of, that should say, little Johnny from Penhill. So Swindon, although the general health of the population is good, as you would probably anticipate, there are severe levels of deprivation in some parts of Swindon. So we were very keen to build up this story of little Johnny from Penhill, which is the most severely deprived area in Swindon, and basically kind of tracking what his life looks like, how it's been to date, and how it's going to go forward for him and his family around his health and wellbeing needs. And since obviously 2001, he's getting older, and so is his family, and so are his needs. The ambition for Swindon is very much working together to tackle inequality and to empower all people across Swindon to live longer, happier, fulfilling lives, supported by thriving and connected communities. And I think that's something that each ICA does well, but recognises that there is a place for system and place and the interdependencies between them. We've talked a little bit this morning around consultation, and I think for me it's more around engagement, because we need to have our residents at the heart of this in co-production. So it's not just about consulting what we may do unto people, it's what we do in conjunction with them to make sure that we achieve what we want to from a health and wellbeing perspective. From an ICA, it is a combination of key partners, which is represented both at system and at place. So we have representation from the Integrated Care Board, the local authority, the voluntary sector, primary and secondary care, and also provider representation. So we feel we have a good representation across Swindon in regard to what we can be doing collectively to have honest conversations to be able to tackle challenges head on. We have worked to define the priorities for Swindon, focusing around good intelligence and insight. So it isn't just about what the data tells us, but what do we know from our communities as well. And that's the really key important thing taking it forward, is what we see written in the data may not be what's felt by our communities, and we need to represent the balance of that going forward. We believe that we've created a governance structure that is fit for purpose. So our ICA is chaired by our chief executive of the local authority. And again, with representation from the organisations that I've already mentioned. We have had our inaugural first meeting of the Integrated Care Alliance on the 12th of October, so just a couple of weeks ago, but have been working in shadow form for pretty much the last year on a 4 to 6 weekly basis. So we feel we're in a very good position to drive our journey forward for Swindon in regard to how we then drive the bigger journey for BSW as well. If you just go to the next slide, please. This slide is just to provide a very quick representation of what the plan is for the Swindon Integrated Care Alliance from September onwards. I know it's a very busy slide, but I'm hoping what you can see there is that it does reflect what we're trying to do at Place, but also taking into account what is happening at System. I take on Will's point about language, because when I was looking at this slide that I didn't write myself, I thought, what does NCTR mean? And then I was like, aha, it means non-criteria to reside. So it's a really important thing that we do think about language. And I think, Will, you're absolutely spot on in that sometimes we get caught up in process and we forget that people are at the heart of this process. And I think it's really encouraging that from a Swindon perspective, we make sure that we put our residents and our patients at the heart of what we do, but we're also seeing that now being reflected at System, which hasn't always been the case previously. So I think that's a really positive step forward. I won't go through the finer detail of the plan, but it's just a representation to show you how it is relatively cross-cutting between health, social care and public health. And it very much puts tackling inequality at the heart. And as a director of public health, across many years, trying to get other organisations to buy into the concept of tackling inequality was generally a hard sell. So it's really phenomenal that with this reform that we're seeing across the NHS, but the broader system, that we're very much putting inequality at the heart of everything we do. Thank you.
Thank you. Were there any further questions or comments following on around the ICA? Now I'm slipping into it, around the Alliance. The only other thing I would add, again, for the benefit of a member of the public who may be watching this, in the same way that the Integrated Care Board is professionals and the Integrated Care Partnership is wider, including elected politicians, the public, and so on. As a sort of comparator to the Integrated Care Alliance, which again is professionals, you've then got the Health and Wellbeing Boards, which sit under the councils. I think they are a very good, or they have the potential to be a very good thing. I think we're on a journey with us. I think it's moving in the right direction. But I think that, so there is that more public-facing, elected representative-facing a body as well, sitting alongside the professionals and hopefully assisting in translating some of that complex technical work into something that is more comprehensible from a public point of view and then more monitorable from a public point of view. We then come on to trying to define what the BSW is. I gather we have a video here. I have to be honest, I don't trust videos at this sort of meeting. Half the time they don't work, but we'll give it a go. If you don't get to watch it online, I do apologize. I'm sure we can send you the link if it doesn't stream properly. It's this painful moment, the number of times I've had this, and I reckon it's 50-50 whether a video will actually work for everyone online or not.
An integrated care system, or ICS, brings NHS providers, local authorities, community providers and voluntary sector partners together to collaboratively plan and organise how health and care services are delivered in their area. The Bath and North East Somerset, Swindon and Wiltshire, or BSW for short, ICS, has a population of almost 1 million people and covers more than 1,500 square miles. Our area includes cities, market towns and large rural areas and works across the geographical area covered by the local authorities for Bath and North East Somerset, Swindon and Wiltshire. In our area, we have over 2,800 voluntary community and social enterprises, 88 GP practices, 2 mental health trusts, an ambulance trust and 3 acute hospitals, Royal United Hospital in Bath, Great Western Hospital in Swindon and Salisbury Hospital, as well as other NHS, community and independent providers. Together, we work with HealthWatch, other partners and our people and communities to collaboratively plan and organise how health and care services are delivered. The aim is to deliver better, more joined up and consistent health and social care for people, and to improve population health, reduce health inequalities, and improve workforce planning. Our ICS works across 3 levels: neighbourhood, place, and system. This allows voices to be heard at a very local level and help shape services. Neighbourhoods are based around our 26 primary care networks, or PCNs, covering populations of 30,000 to 50,000 people. These are groups of GP practices and multidisciplinary teams with clinicians and health professionals from a wide range of services working together. At place level, we have 3 place-based partnerships which align with the boundaries of our local authorities. These are called Integrated Care Alliances, or ICAs. Our ICAs bring together health and care providers across NHS, community, local government and voluntary services to join up care pathways and inform local services redesign. They'll also work with the local authority health and wellbeing boards on local health and wellbeing strategies. Each integrated care system has 2 statutory elements: an Integrated Care Board, or ICB, which is an NHS organisation, and an Integrated Care Partnership, or ICP, which is a committee jointly established by the ICB and the local authorities in the ICB area. The Integrated Care Board is a statutory organisation that will develop a plan for meeting the health needs of the population in its area, manage the local NHS budget, and arrange for the provision of health services in its area. The Integrated Care Partnership is a forum that brings together a wide range of organisations and stakeholders. The ICP's principal function is to develop the integrated care strategy for our ICS, to address the broad health and social care needs of the population, including determinants of health such as employment, environment, and housing issues. Our ICS is known as BSW Together. The changes to the way we organise services are important steps in our journey to becoming a thriving integrated care system, bringing increased benefits for local people and communities. By better integrating services both within the NHS and across the health and social care system, we will be able to improve people's outcomes and experiences of care. To find out more, visit our website www.bswtogether.org.uk.
Great, thank you. Do then we have any further questions from anyone on the meeting about this, or do we all feel we thoroughly understand how we all fit together and what we're doing here? Honestly? Good? Right? No, Alison.
Thank you. Just one question. I'm very deeply conscious that we're going into an extraordinarily difficult financial situation. Health service and all the people we work amongst. And that conversation we need to start happening with the public and our communities is about what their expectations of their health and social care services should be for the future. And it could be radically different from what they expect now, given the constraints that could be with us. I'm not sure where in this architecture the responsibility for initiating and informing a genuine and honest conversation with our communities lies. Is it at place? Is it allowed? Is it where?
Goodness, I can have a stab at answering that from a council perspective, though we've got other council leaders and chief execs who may want to come in and tell me off. But my assessment from a council side is that we won't know. We normally find out on December the 24th what our assistance from government is going to be in terms of setting our own budgets, therefore understanding what the impact will be, and then have a very short window to try and talk to the public. We may find out a little earlier, who knows. Next Monday has been touted as the great reveal. We don't have technically a prime minister probably at the moment. In fact, we probably don't have a prime minister at the moment, technically speaking. So from the NHS perspective and how to get that conversation across, I don't know, is that something that the NHS is normally engaging with, or do you leave that to Westminster to break the bad news?
No, I mean, I think
it's a really important fact. And I think one of the big changes actually with the ICS is a change in a desire for the NHS to become much more open and transparent and much more engaged in a way that's ongoing, proactive, and actually genuinely involves people in the decision making, rather that so that we're working out how we deliver services with people rather than to people, which has been very much a criticism as the NHS. So we're starting in the foothills of this, but what we know is that we need to do work and some of the learning and some of the really good work that local authorities, and I'll use Wiltshire as an example of that because some of your work with communities, I think we need to learn from. But the desire is to do it at all levels, to do it at the very local, at neighbourhood, at place and at system, and to make sure it's matrix so that we get the right people involved in how do we reach out, how do we really genuinely talk to all our communities. We want to do that in partnership. And the starting point is that we're already having those conversations about how do we do community engagement in a very different way so that we are having a continual dialogue with our communities rather than just when we think we really need to talk to them. So not going to help us for this winter because we're going to that's something to build on, but I think a real desire to do that going forward.
Thank you. Please.
I'm really encouraged that just about every speaker has talked about increasing public engagement, listening to our people, putting people at the centre, etc. Looking around the room, I've been in this room and others for many, many years. I've heard that phrase many, many times. And as a public sector leader myself, probably listened to it and then done what I thought was best. And that for me is the real challenge here, because if we genuinely listen to our public, they may tell us, that we're going to do, they want us to do something that we don't want to do. At the moment, every organisation, I think, around this room, around the partnership, consults and would say they do. The challenge I'm going to say to you is, okay, do you really? Because everyone in this room will say, I'm not sure we do. And I think the overriding thing with the difficulties coming up, rather than talk about what they want us to do, I would ask us to focus on how we do what we do. Because my experience and the feedback that I get is that's more important, because they don't need to understand about healthcare delivery or social care delivery. They want to know what it feels like. And you all know in your heart of hearts that how we do stuff is things we can change. What we do, running a hospital, GP practice, etc., that is largely what it is. But how we do stuff, we can change that, and it doesn't cost money. So I would just ask us to focus on that rather than what we're going to have to cut this, that, and the other. We are where we are. Thank you.
Thank you. That sounds like a very fair point. And consultation is one of these dangerous areas. There are times when we want to consult because we really want to understand what people think and shape things accordingly. And then we have statutory consultations, like a local plan, where we have to ignore the fact people say we don't want that there because it's not a planning reason, for example. And the public are consulted, over-consulted, and rightly feel that they're not listened to on some issues because some of them really are too complex. A conversation is far better than a tick box consultation. Right, I am not seeing any, I don't think we entirely answered your question, Alison, but it's going to be difficult and dealt with in different ways. How about that? Okay, yes.
Thank you. Just following on from that and all the structural stuff, just to say that the voluntary sector is vast across BSW, as you heard, with over 2,800 separate organisations. And each integrated care system was required under NHS guidelines to have a voluntary sector alliance working at system level. So the way that we've structured that in BSW is to bring together the 4 infrastructure organisations. So there's sort of Council for Voluntary Services and Rural Councils. So there's 4 of us, 2 for Wiltshire because of its size and morality, 1 for Baines and 1 for Swindon. And we try our best to actually represent that sector. So it's a way that we can cascade information down, and it's a way that we can gather feedback upwards. With that in mind, I think it's quite important that that alliance forms part of the ICP. So Lynn would like to stay on, who's the other member of the alliance who's available today, to feed into the strategy discussion in the next session, if that's okay with you.
I certainly don't have an issue with that. We have deliberately, for this first meeting, not tried to define membership, because I'm pretty sure if we did, we'd end up with several hundred people. This is a public meeting. The entire population of Wiltshire could attend if they wanted to. I don't know where they park, but they could attend. So we're going to have to work that through, and I'm not anticipating us having much part two with the ICP moving forward. I think we need to kick off the strategy today, which requires, what's a good analogy? American lawmaking. There's a saying that you don't ever show someone how the sausage is made, you just tell them what the sausage is like. We've got to do some of the working out how the sausage is made for the strategy today, and that really is something I think probably best not done in public. But once we actually get forward with the strategy, then that all needs to be absolutely discussed and put forward in a public forum. Right, I'm not seeing any other hands up, so we've got an item down for any other business. I mean, I think there are two things I'd note. I think we're going to need to somehow have a terms of reference, albeit as light a terms of reference as we can. I think that we need to make sure that we are then agreeing whatever terms of reference look like. It's not something to do today, but it's something that we will need to make sure that we collectively are agreeing to, because otherwise it's going to be perhaps tricky when we encounter something that someone says, well, what do our terms of reference say? We mustn't be subsumed by governance. There is a risk of that, and that really would be a problem. And again, defining membership, and again, we've heard a lot about not needing to come to votes. A partnership like this should never need to come to votes. It should be something that is worked out by partners coming together, expressing their views, and making sure that we come in the end to consensus. But in terms of defining that membership and who is formally a member and who is a member of the public attending, I kind of instinctively feel I don't really want to, but we may need to. So again, just a question moving forward. So again, if I just, for the sake of the public, before we go into a closed session, the next issue is about not defining the strategy, but deciding how we are going to work out how we're defining the strategy. Just so you understand why it's not going to be in public. If we were defining the strategy, that would absolutely essentially have to be done in public. So